My mother-in-law erased me from the family for 6 years. Told everyone I had abandoned her son, that I was unstable, that I was the reason their family fell apart. Then last spring, she walked through the front door of the boutique hotel I built from nothing and demanded I hand over the entire East Wing lease so her new business could move in rent-free. What she didn't know was that the building she was standing in, the one she'd chosen because it sat on the most prestigious block in downtown Asheville, North Carolina, I owned every square foot of it. My name is Sloane. I'm 34 years old. I run a boutique hotel called the Birchwood, and before I tell you what happened the night my mother-in-law walked back into my life, I need to tell you what she took from me first. I married into that family when I was 26. My husband, we'll call him my ex-husband now, was this golden son. Charming, educated, the kind of man who seemed perfect from the outside. His mother had built her entire identity around him. She called every Sunday. She showed up to our apartment unannounced. She had opinions about how I cooked, how I dressed, whether or not I was working too much. And working too much, according to her, was anything that made me more successful than her son. I had been quietly building my career in hospitality management for years. I worked my way up from front desk associate at a mid-range chain hotel in Charlotte to regional operations manager by the time I was 28. I managed budgets. I turned around underperforming properties. I was good at what I did, and I loved it. My mother-in-law hated that. She didn't say it outright, women like her never do, but she made her feelings clear in other ways. The backhanded compliments. The subtle comments to my husband about how a wife should be present, not ambitious. The way she would look at me at the dinner table like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The divorce came after 3 years of marriage. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and exhausting and inevitable. What happened afterward, though? That was loud. My mother-in-law told everyone in their social circle that I had walked out on her son without reason, that I had been emotionally unstable, that I had manipulated him for money and connections. She told his aunts, his cousins, his college friends. She told people I had worked with through mutual acquaintances. She made sure I was the villain in every version of the story she told, and she told it constantly and convincingly for 6 years. I found out the extent of it slowly, the way you find out most quiet devastation, in pieces. A former colleague who seemed suddenly cold, a professional contact who stopped returning my calls, a woman I had considered a friend who told me gently what had been said about me and by whom. My mother-in-law had used her son's network like a weapon and pointed it directly at my reputation. I didn't fight it. I know that sounds strange, but I had watched enough of those battles to know that engaging in one publicly only gives the other person more oxygen. Instead, I disappeared from that world entirely and built a new one. 4 years ago, I found the property on Meriwether Street in downtown Asheville. It was a crumbling 1920s building that had been a textile warehouse, then a failed event space, then nothing. It had sat vacant for almost 2 years. The bones were extraordinary. Exposed brick, 16-foot ceilings, original hardwood floors under decades of grime. I had been saving obsessively since the divorce. I had also made a series of smart short-term rental investments in the Asheville market, starting in year 2 of rebuilding my life, which had generated serious capital by the time the Meriwether property came to market. I bought it with a combination of cash and a single commercial loan I paid off 18 months ahead of schedule. I spent 11 months in renovation, doing as much hands-on project management as I possibly could to keep costs controlled. I opened the Birchwood 27 months ago, and it was fully booked within its first 3 weekends. Last year, it was named one of the top boutique hotels in the Southeast by 2 independent travel publications. I also bought the building next door 14 months ago. It had a ground-floor commercial retail space and 2 floors of loft offices above it. It came up in a distressed sale. I paid cash. The 2 properties together made up what my attorney called a small but genuinely valuable real estate portfolio in one of the fastest appreciating urban markets in the country. I was not thinking about my mother-in-law when I built any of it. I was thinking about the work. That is the honest truth. I wasn't building toward revenge. I was building toward peace. And then one Saturday evening in April, my front desk manager found me in the middle of checking vendor invoices in my back office and told me there was a woman in the lobby who was refusing to speak to anyone but the owner. The way she said it, the careful, controlled tone that front desk staff use when a guest is being difficult, made me set my pen down. I walked out through the side hallway that opens into the lobby, and I stopped. My mother-in-law was standing at the center of the Birchwood lobby in a winter white blazer, looking around with the particular expression of someone who has already decided to be unimpressed. She was with two other people, a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit that was slightly too large for him, and a woman in her 40s who was carrying a leather portfolio and trying very hard to look important. I had not seen my mother-in-law in 6 years. She looked older, which surprised me for a fraction of a second, before I remembered that 6 years is a long time. She had always been meticulous about her appearance. She still was. But there was something thin about her now, a tension around her jaw that hadn't been there before. She saw me before I spoke, and I watched her face go through something complicated. A flicker of surprise that she controlled almost instantly, then a return to the practiced expression of someone who has decided they have the upper hand in every room they enter. I didn't rush toward her. I walked at my normal pace, stopped about 5 feet away, and waited. "I heard this was your place," she said instead of hello. Her tone was light, almost conversational, the way you'd talk about a distant acquaintance's hobby project. "It's charming, smaller than I expected." The man beside her shifted his weight. The woman with the portfolio looked at the floor. "Is there something I can help you with?" I asked. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes, it never had. "Actually, yes. I've been meaning to reach out through proper channels, but I thought a face-to-face was more appropriate given our history. I'm launching a wellness consulting firm. My business partner here," she gestured toward the man in the suit, "has clients across the Southeast, and we've identified the ground floor commercial space in the building next door to this one as an ideal location for our flagship office." She paused. She was waiting for me to show recognition, maybe gratitude that she would consider a property connected to me. "I'm familiar with that space," I said. "We'd like to move in by June 1st, she continued, clasping her hands in front of her. "We're prepared to offer a year-long lease at a below-market rate in exchange for exclusivity and some minor renovations we'd handle ourselves. We have a contractor lined up. The space needs updating anyway." She glanced around my lobby again with that studied expression of polite condescension. "I think it would be good for both of us. It would give you a reputable anchor tenant, and it would give us the Meriwether Street address, which frankly carries more weight than the actual building." I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "Who do you think owns that building?" She smiled again. "I know you manage this hotel. I assumed this property might be under the same management group." She tilted her head slightly. "I spoke with the listing agent who handled the sale. He said the property changed hands about a year ago through a private LLC. We haven't been able to identify the owner directly, which is why I came to you. I thought you might know how to get in touch with whoever's responsible for leasing decisions." The man in the suit nodded in agreement, as if this were a perfectly reasonable thing to say. "What's your firm's name?" I asked. She gave me the name. It meant nothing to me. I asked for her business partner's name. He introduced himself as someone who worked closely with several major regional wellness brands, which meant, in the particular dialect of people who inflate their credentials in hotel lobbies, that he knew some people who had worked adjacent to some businesses that had done reasonably well. "Tell me more about what you're envisioning," I said. She took this as encouragement. She launched into a detailed description of their concept: a high-end wellness consulting space, corporate retreats, executive coaching clients. She talked about the renovation they planned. She used the word synergy twice. She described how having my hotel next door would be complementary to their brand, and then she added, almost as an aside, that they would need the lease terms to reflect the ground floor reality, that they were bringing significant brand value to the address. Below market rate, free rent through the renovation period, a build-out budget covered by the property owner. "We'd expect to be in by June 1st, she repeated, "and we'd need a 5-year term with the option to renew." I was quiet for a moment. The lobby of the Birchwood was busy that evening. A couple was checking in at the front desk. 2 guests were sitting near the fireplace with glasses of wine. A staff member was arranging a flower delivery near the side entrance. The space was full and warm and exactly what I had designed it to be, and this woman was standing in the middle of it, asking me to help her get a sweetheart deal on a building she had no idea I owned. "I'd like to show you something," I said. "Come with me." I led the 3 of them to the small conference room just off the main lobby. I use it for vendor meetings and the occasional private event consultation. I closed the door behind us and gestured for them to sit down. My mother-in-law looked around the room approvingly. Her business partner pulled out his phone. The woman with the portfolio opened it and produced what appeared to be a draft term sheet. I went to the filing cabinet in the corner of the room. I opened the second drawer and removed a manila folder with the property address written on the tab in my own handwriting. I set it on the table and slid it across to my mother-in-law. "Open that," I said. She looked at me once, then opened the folder. Inside was a copy of the recorded deed for the Merriweather adjacent property, along with the articles of organization for the LLC that purchased it. She scanned the document. I watched the moment she reached the name of the managing member. She went very still. The man in the suit leaned over to look. The woman with the portfolio stopped writing. "The managing member of the LLC that owns that building," I said, "is me. I purchased it 14 months ago. I own the commercial space on the ground floor, the loft offices on the second and third floors, and the parking easement behind the building. There is no listing agent with leasing authority. Any leasing decisions go through me and my attorney." My mother-in-law set the document down on the table very carefully, the way someone handles something they wish they hadn't touched. "I see," she said. Her voice was controlled, but the color in her face had shifted. "So when you came in here tonight to ask me to help you get in touch with the building's owner," I continued, keeping my voice even, "you were actually asking me to call myself." Her business partner cleared his throat. "Well," he said, with the kind of forced brightness that men use when they're trying to rescue a situation, "this actually simplifies things considerably. We can just negotiate directly with you. That's even better, cuts out the middleman." I looked at him. "What made you think the current terms I'd offer you are the same as what you just proposed to my front desk manager?" He opened his mouth and closed it. My mother-in-law had recovered some of her composure. She straightened in her chair and looked at me directly. "I think there's an opportunity here for both of us," she said. "I understand there may be some personal history that complicates things, but this is a business conversation. I'd ask you to treat it as one." "I am treating it as one," I said. "Then you understand that having a professional wellness firm in that space benefits you. It elevates the entire block. Our client base overlaps with yours. There's real upside here." "What's the current market rate per square foot for ground floor commercial on Merriweather?" I asked. She looked at her business partner. He named a number that was approximately 40% below what the space would command in the current market. "That's not the current rate," I said. I named the actual figure. "It's been rising steadily for the last 18 months. I had the space appraised 8 weeks ago." Her business partner shifted in his chair. "There's always room for negotiation in a new relationship," he said. "I agree," I said, "but I want to make sure we're starting from accurate numbers." My mother-in-law leaned forward slightly. "We're prepared to be reasonable, but I want to be honest with you. The renovation the space needs is significant. The electrical panel alone is going to cost." "I had a full inspection done when I purchased the property," I said. "The electrical panel was replaced 2 years before the sale. The HVAC is 3 years old. The plumbing was updated in 2019. I have all of that documentation." I paused. "The space doesn't need the kind of renovation you're describing." The room went quiet. Her business partner looked at his phone. The woman with the portfolio closed it. My mother-in-law looked at me for a long moment. The practiced confidence she had carried into this building was still there, but something behind it had shifted. She was recalibrating. "I have to ask you something," she said finally. Her voice was quieter now. "Are you going to let what happened between our families affect a professional decision?" "That's a fair question," I said. "Let me ask you one in return. In the 6 years since the divorce, did you tell people that I had abandoned your son?" She held my gaze. "That was a difficult time for all of us. Did you tell people I was emotionally unstable? People were upset. Things were said. Did you contact professional acquaintances of mine and tell them I had manipulated your son for financial gain?" The room was very quiet. "I was protecting my family," she said. "I know you were," I said, "and what I built in the 6 years after that conversation is something I did entirely on my own, without your family's network, without the professional contacts you tried to close off, and without anyone's protection but my own. So, to answer your question, no, I'm not going to let personal history affect a professional decision. I'm going to make the professional decision that's correct for this property. And the correct decision is to lease that space at market rate, with standard commercial terms, to a tenant who can demonstrate financial stability and a proven business history." I opened the folder again and placed a blank lease template on top of the deed documents. I slid it toward her. If your firm is interested in the space under those terms, I'm happy to have my attorney send over a formal proposal. The security deposit is 3 months' rent. The lease term is negotiable between 2 and 5 years. There are no concessions for build-out, because the space doesn't require the build-out you described. Her business partner picked up the lease template and read the first page. I watched his expression change as he reached the financial terms. He started. This is considerably above what we'd budgeted. I know, I said. The market moved, that's the number. My mother-in-law looked at the document in his hands. Then she looked at me. For the first time since she had walked into my lobby, something in her expression broke loose from its practiced position. It wasn't quite vulnerability. It was something closer to the particular deflation of someone who has spent years constructing a version of events in which they always had the power and has just encountered evidence that they were wrong the entire time. You've done well for yourself, she said. It cost her something to say it. I could hear that. I had to, I said simply. She nodded slowly. I owe you an apology for the things that were said. I had spent a long time thinking about what I would do if she ever said those words. In the early years after the divorce, I had imagined the conversation 100 different ways. Some of them were loud. Some of them were tearful. Some of them were triumphant in ways I'm not proud of now. What actually happened was quieter than any of those versions. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. And I meant it, and also I meant exactly that and nothing more. I wasn't going to give her absolution she hadn't earned. I wasn't going to pretend the 6 years of professional damage could be repaired in a conference room in 20 minutes. But I also wasn't going to carry any more of it than I needed to. If your firm decides the terms work, I said, standing up and collecting the documents, have your attorney reach out to mine. I'll send his contact information to the email address on your business card. She stood. Her business partner stood. The woman with the portfolio gathered her things. At the door of the conference room, my mother-in-law paused. She looked back at me, and for a moment she looked less like the woman who had made my life smaller for 6 years, and more like someone who was genuinely tired. He's not doing well, you know, she said quietly. My son, he's been through some things. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And that was also true. She nodded and walked out through the lobby. Her business partner and the woman with the portfolio followed her. I watched through the conference room window as my front desk manager opened the front door for them, and they stepped out into the April evening. I stood in the conference room for a moment after they left. The hotel hummed around me, voices from the lobby, the distant sound of kitchen prep for the next morning's breakfast service, the soft sound of the HVAC doing exactly what it was supposed to do. 3 weeks later, my attorney received a formal inquiry from my mother-in-law's business partner. They were interested in the space under market terms. The negotiation took 2 weeks and concluded with a 5-year lease at full market rate. No build-out concessions, standard deposit. I signed it on a Tuesday morning before the breakfast service started. I set the pen down and looked out the window of my office at the building next door. The one I bought in a distressed sale 14 months ago. The one that had seemed like a risk at the time and had turned out to be the kind of decision you make when you trust yourself completely. I had built a real estate portfolio in a city that once felt like my only option when everything else closed down. I had turned the years when my name was being quietly dismantled in other people's conversations into the years when I was quietly building something that would last. The morning light was coming in strong off the Blue Ridge, the way it does in April in Asheville, turning everything gold and almost unbearably clear. If there is anything I know now that I didn't know at 26, it's this. The people who try to make you small are usually doing it because they cannot afford for you to be large. They are working with limited resources, limited courage, limited imagination, limited room in their version of the world for someone who refuses to stay in the place they assigned you. That is their constraint, not yours. I didn't evict my mother-in-law's business from a property she never knew I owned. I gave her the opportunity to be a legitimate tenant at a fair price, and she took it. That's not mercy, and it's not forgiveness in the way people mean when they say the word easily. It's something quieter. It's the decision to stop letting someone else's story about you take up space in your life. I went downstairs and started the breakfast service. The morning rush came in. Guests checking out, guests ordering eggs and coffee, the particular energy of a hotel waking up that I have loved every day since the first morning I opened those doors. My staff moved around each other with the easy rhythm of a team that knows what it's doing. I had built this, every inch of it. And the woman who had spent 6 years trying to convince the world I was nothing was now my tenant. I poured myself a cup of coffee and got back to work.